Listen, man. You have to be reasonable if you want to live in this neighborhood. $500 a month or I didn't warn you. The metallic click of a gun being pulled from its holster rang dry and cold in the early morning air, aimed directly at the man who stood panting from his workout. The man was tall, muscular, sweat dripping from his simple, worn but clean tracksuit. He had just stopped in front of a spacious two-story house, the walls freshly painted cream, the white windows standing out against the red brick surrounding it. Clearly its new owner. His face, with its strong lines and tanned skin, looked surprised for a moment, then quickly returned to its usual calm. He looked at the policeman in front of him, a man of about 40, his face red from the early morning sun, or for some other more unpleasant reason, his eyes hostile, the badge on his uniform chest reading Baxter. "I don't understand," the man replied, his voice low and calm, though his heart began to beat faster at the sight of the black barrel. "What protection fee?" Baxter sneered, a sneer that was both condescending and malicious, revealing teeth stained yellow by tobacco. "Don't play innocent with me. You're new here, aren't you? We know all about you. You like to hide where you don't belong, and you're making the neighborhood look bad. Why is this police officer behaving like a thug demanding protection money? What is the protection fee he is demanding? Right in the middle of a peaceful, upscale neighborhood? And who is this man, with his plain appearance but strangely calm demeanor? Will he succumb to the guns and the insults? Or is an undercurrent brewing? Let's find out. The man was Marcus Thorne. He had just turned 50 a few months earlier, and this house, nestled on the tree-lined Oak Lane in McLean, Virginia, was the result of more than 30 years of hard work. He had moved in only 3 days earlier, and the boxes were still stacked in the living room. This was where he had planned to find some peace after years of stress, a place to retreat when time allowed. As a habit that has been ingrained in his blood for decades, every morning, rain or shine, Marcus spends an hour jogging. It is not only to maintain his extraordinary health at the age of 50, but also a time for him to organize his thoughts and prepare for a new day. This morning, he ran a lap around his new neighborhood, past magnificent villas with perfectly manicured lawns and rose hedges in full bloom. The air is fresh and quiet, a far cry from the hustle and bustle he usually faces. Officer Kevin Baxter of the Fairfax County Police Department had noticed Marcus the day before when he saw the old moving truck parked in front of 125 Oak Lane and a burly black man carrying heavy boxes into the house by himself. A dirty plan began to form in Baxter's mind. Baxter was not a good cop. He was a worm, someone who used his badge and gun to take advantage of people he considered weak or outside, people he thought would not dare to speak up. In particular, he had a secret hatred for people of color who dared to climb up and move into neighborhoods he considered rich white. For Baxter, Marcus's presence was an opportunity to make the law, to earn some extra spending money, and also to show off to the newcomer. As Marcus finished his 5-mile run and stood in front of his house, stretching and breathing deeply to calm his heart rate, Baxter's patrol car rolled slowly down the street. It didn't blare its siren, just rolled silently to a stop in front of him. The red and blue lights on the roof weren't on, but its presence at this hour, in this way, was a bad sign. Baxter stepped out of the car, his right hand resting lightly on the butt of the gun at his hip, a deliberate habit of showing his authority. He did not greet the formality of the salute, but went straight to the point, his tone patronizing. "Hey, buddy, new here?" Marcus nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "Yeah, I just moved here." "Then you should know the rules here," Baxter said, circling Marcus, his eyes appraising him from head to toe. "In this neighborhood, Everyone has to pay a little for security. Call it a neighborhood fee." Marcus frowned. "I don't understand. I thought security was the responsibility of the police and that we, the people, paid our taxes." Baxter smiled faintly, a sneer. "Taxes are the government's business up there. This is my business. The real deal down here, $500 a month, cash. Give it to me at the beginning of each month. Consider it your fee for being left alone in this neighborhood, for not having your car accidentally scratched, for not having your house mistakenly stoned." The threat was not hidden. Marcus's initial surprise quickly turned to quiet anger. He had faced all kinds of dangers and bad guys in his career. But to be blackmailed by a police officer on his doorstep, in a country he had sworn to protect, was unacceptable. "I will not pay you any ridiculous amount of money," Marcus said firmly, his voice still controlled but noticeably cold. "What you are doing is illegal. You are blackmailing." Marcus's blunt refusal and accusation made Baxter freeze for a second. Then his anger flared. His face turned red. He hadn't expected his prey to be so stubborn. "What did you say? Illegal?" Baxter growled, moving closer to Marcus, deliberately invading his personal space. "Who are you to talk to me about the law? You guys!" He spat onto Marcus's manicured lawn. "Think a little dirty money will get you a pass, acting like a big shot? This neighborhood isn't for the likes of you. I'll show you if you don't behave." Baxter's blunt, racist tirades only added to the tension. He continued to hurl insults, implying that Marcus must be a criminal, or that the money for the house came from shady dealings. "I don't know what you do to be able to afford a house here. You're probably dealing drugs or something. Let me check your background. See if you're clean." Marcus tried to keep his cool, though his fists were clenched. "You are slandering me, officer, and you are abusing your authority. I demand that you leave immediately, before I formally complain about your behavior to your superiors." Marcus's threat to report him only added fuel to Baxter's already burning anger. He felt his authority, a twisted authority he had created, was being seriously challenged by a stranger. "You dare threaten me?" Baxter roared, his voice cracking with anger. "Let me show you who has the power here. Who can complain to whom?" In a surprisingly quick move for a heavy-set man, Baxter pulled a Glock 19 from the holster at his hip. The metal clicked sharply against leather. He aimed the cold, black muzzle at Marcus's chest, his index finger hovering over the trigger. "Now you want to report me, nigger?" The racial slur finally came out, naked. "Or do you want me to report you for resisting and attempting to assault a police officer?" He knew Marcus was unarmed and had no intention of attacking, but in his frenzy he was willing to make up anything. Marcus stood still as a statue, his eyes not on the barrel of the gun, but straight into Baxter's bloodshot eyes. He showed no fear, even though the situation was more dangerous than any confrontation he had ever experienced in peacetime. There was a coldness and determination in his eyes that was terrifying, something that made Baxter, even though he was in the upper hand, feel a little creepy, a little hesitant for a moment. But then the aggression, the smugness of thinking he had the upper hand, took over. "Lower your gun." "Officer Baxter," Marcus said, his voice steady, unwavering, but there was an underlying authority that began to creep into each word. "You're way out of line. This will not end well for you. I guarantee it." Marcus Thorne's mind was racing with the speed of a computer. With his decades of military training and the life-and-death situations he had faced, subduing Baxter and disarming him would not be too difficult. A punch to the wrist, a tackle, and the situation could be over in seconds. But he also knew that if he did, the situation could become much more complicated. Baxter might panic and pull the trigger. Or he might accuse him of assaulting a law enforcement officer, and with his skin color, with the prejudices that still existed, his words might not carry as much weight as those of a white police officer, no matter how wrong he was. He needed another solution, one that would reveal the truth, expose Baxter's true colors without resorting to violence on his part, at least not now. He glanced over Baxter's shoulder and noticed a small, dome-shaped security camera mounted on the porch of the house across the street. A glimmer of hope. Maybe it had recorded some or all of this. It would be objective evidence. Baxter kept the gun pointed at Marcus, his voice full of smugness and menace. You have two choices. Simple. Either take out your wallet, $500, cold hard cash, right now, or I call for backup, and you'll have to explain your asshole attitude and suspicious behavior to a dozen other cops. Take your pick, he smirked, certain he had his opponent cornered. That was when Marcus made his decision. He had given Baxter enough time to stop, to realize his stupidity. Now it was time to show him the consequences. Okay, Officer Baxter, Marcus said, his voice oddly calm. You want backup, right? Let me call for you. I think I have the number of someone you'll really want to talk to. Baxter knitted his bushy eyebrows, a flash of surprise and suspicion crossing his flushed face. What the hell are you up to? Marcus slowly, very slowly, reached into the pocket of his sweatpants with his right hand. He did everything slowly, deliberately, so that Baxter would have no reason to misunderstand or act rashly. He pulled out his cell phone, an older model smartphone with a few scratches on the screen. I'll call Sheriff Frank Miller, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Baxter's face for a second. I think he'll be very concerned about your work ethic and attitude towards a citizen, especially one new to his district. At the mention of the sheriff's name, Baxter burst out laughing, a loud, contemptuous laugh. Frank Miller? Sheriff Miller? He shook his head, looking as if he'd just heard the world's worst joke. Who the hell do you think you are, calling the sheriff? You think he's got time to listen to a punk? A nigger like you slandering his employees? Are you daydreaming? Marcus didn't respond to the taunt. He just silently dialed a series of numbers on the phone screen, numbers he had memorized long ago. The phone rang a few times, and then a familiar, slightly sleepy voice came on the other end. Frank? It's Marcus. Marcus's tone remained calm, even friendly. Sorry to bother you on such a beautiful weekend morning, but I've been having a bit of a problem with one of your officers, Baxter, badge number. Baxter, what's your badge number? He turned to Baxter, his tone oddly polite, as if he were asking a passerby for the time. Baxter froze. The way Marcus Thorne called the sheriff by his first name, Frank, so casually and familiarly, combined with the man's almost unbelievable confidence, made a sense of unease, a foreboding creep into Baxter's mind. But his aggressive nature and habit of looking down on others were ingrained in him. He tried to act tough, even though his heart was starting to waver. Number 347. So what? You think I'm afraid of you? Marcus continued into the phone. Number 347, Frank. Officer Baxter. He's pointing a pistol at me right now, right in front of my house in McLean, demanding $500 a month in protection money. Would you mind coming over? The address is 125 Oak Lane. Yes, that's my new house. Come and see it. He paused, listening to what was being said on the other end, then continued, a small smile playing on his lips. Oh, you're nearby? Good. That'll be quick then. Okay. Thanks, Frank. See you later. He hung up, then put the phone back in his pocket, his eyes fixed on Baxter, a look that was no longer patient. Baxter began to sense that something was really wrong. His face slowly changed color, from red to pale. Who were you talking to? You're lying. You can't know the sheriff, he stammered, his voice losing its ferocity. I just spoke with Sheriff Frank Miller, Marcus replied, his voice now revealing the authority he had been trying so hard to maintain. Frank is my cousin, my aunt's son, to be exact. Frank said he was on his way here. Just a few minutes. Marcus Thorne's words were like sledgehammers hitting Baxter in the head. Sheriff Frank Miller's cousin? He looked back at the man in front of him, the old tracksuit, the dark skin, but the strong, determined body, and especially the strange calmness even when a gun was pointed at him. A feeling of horror, a feeling of utter regret began to invade Baxter's mind and body. The gun in his hand began to tremble violently, then slowly lowered. He stammered, his voice breathless. No, it can't be. Who are you? Marcus looked straight into Baxter's eyes, now wide with terror. His voice was icy, but thunderous. I am Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne, United States Army. I am currently assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Pentagon, and this is my home. Officer Baxter, you have just made a mistake. A very, very serious mistake that you may never be able to correct in this lifetime. At the word Lieutenant General, at the word Pentagon, Baxter's face turned as white as a sheet of paper pulled out of a photocopier. The Glock 19 slipped from his numb hand and fell to the cement floor in front of his house with a cold, dry click. He could no longer stand. His knees gave out, and he slowly sank to his knees, clutching his head, his body shaking like a leaf. My God, I don't know. I really don't know. Baxter began to cry, sobbing, pitiful. The previous aggression, the arrogance, the condescending attitude had disappeared without a trace. Now, in front of Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne was nothing more than a coward, a pitiful person facing the inevitable collapse of his career and perhaps his life. I'm blind. I didn't mean to. Please, General. Please, General. Forgive me this once. Please give me a chance to make things right. He raised his tear-stained and snot-stained face, looking at Marcus with pleading, desperate eyes. Only about 5 minutes later, not the 10 Baxter might have desperately hoped. 2 county patrol cars, lights flashing and sirens blaring across the quiet street, came to a stop in front of 125 Oak Lane. In the lead was Sheriff Frank Miller's familiar black and white Ford Explorer. He stepped out quickly, his usually easygoing face now strained with worry and barely concealed anger. Seeing Marcus Thorne, his respected cousin, standing there, unharmed, and then seeing Officer Kevin Baxter, one of his own subordinates, kneeling on the ground like a criminal, Chief Miller understood the gravity of the situation. Marcus, are you okay? He hurried over to Marcus, his voice full of concern. I'm fine, Frank. In one piece, Marcus said, his voice tinged with sarcasm, but still remarkably calm. Just a rather unfriendly and rather unimpressive welcome from one of your officers. He doesn't seem to like the new neighbors very much, especially when they refuse to tip him. Frank Miller whirled around, looking at Baxter with eyes that seemed to be on fire. Baxter, what the hell are you doing here? His voice was hissed, filled with frustration and anger. Baxter did not dare to look up, only continued to cry, stammering meaningless words of forgiveness. Sir, Sheriff, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't know. Frank Miller didn't want to hear another word from this bastard. He signaled to the 2 police officers who had just gotten out of the second car. Disarm him. Oh, his gun is lying there. Check the magazine for any remaining bullets. Handcuff him immediately. Take him straight to the station. Detain him for investigation of abuse of power, threatening a citizen with a military weapon, and signs of corruption and extortion." The two officers quickly carried out their orders. Baxter did not resist, allowing them to handcuff him behind his back and escort him into the car. He continued to cry and beg, but no one paid any attention. Sheriff Miller turned back to Marcus Thorne, his face filled with guilt and shame. "Marcus, I am so sorry about this. I don't know what else to say to express my outrage at Baxter's unacceptable behavior. He has brought shame upon the entire department. I promise you, I will make sure this is investigated and handled with the utmost seriousness, without any mercy." Marcus put his hand on his cousin's shoulder. "I trust you. Frank, I know you'll do what needs to be done. Clean up your team." A small crime scene investigation team was quickly dispatched by Sheriff Miller. They carefully collected Baxter's Glock 19 as evidence, took photographs of the scene, and took a detailed statement from General Thorne. Marcus also pointed out the location of a security camera mounted on the neighbor's porch, which they hoped would capture important events. The fact that the victim of a case of alleged abuse of power and extortion was a serving lieutenant general of the Army, working at the Pentagon, one of the most powerful symbols of the United States, and ironically, having a close family relationship with the chief of police of that area, raised the seriousness of the case to a new level. This was no longer an internal incident that could be easily overlooked or handled lightly. Chief Frank Miller, in addition to being extremely angry because Baxter's behavior had ruined the reputation of the police department he was trying to build, also felt extremely ashamed and guilty towards his cousin, his childhood friend. He had been very happy to help Marcus find this house, wishing him a truly peaceful place to rest after years of dedication to the country. Yet, right in the first days of Marcus's move, this incident happened. That only increased his determination to clean up the team, eliminating bad apples like Baxter. He immediately ordered the Internal Audit Department to review Officer Kevin Baxter's entire work record, including his resume, annual performance reviews, and especially any previous complaints or accusations of misconduct that may have been overlooked, downplayed, or suppressed for some reason. Frank Miller suspected that this was not the first time Baxter had engaged in similar behavior. Fortunately, and also as an undeniable proof, the security camera of the neighbor across the street, although not the most modern, was working properly. The video, although not recording clear sound, recorded almost the entire main event of the incident, from the moment Officer Baxter approached General Thorne, Baxter's gestures and harsh attitude, to the act of him pulling out a gun and pointing it directly at General Thorne. The image of Baxter then suddenly lowering the gun, then kneeling down and begging was also very clear. There was no denying it. Several neighbors, awakened by the sound of police sirens on a quiet weekend morning, came out to see what had happened. When they learned what had happened, some said they had heard a loud argument coming from the Thorne residence before the police arrived, although they did not know what it was about. Their testimony, albeit circumstantial, added to the case. With the undeniable evidence from the videotape, the strong and authoritative testimony of Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne, and the complete weakness of Kevin Baxter, he could no longer offer any defense or denial after learning the true identity of the victim. The internal investigation by the Fairfax County Police Department and then the criminal investigation by the District Attorney's Office proceeded with astonishing speed and efficiency. Kevin Baxter was immediately and permanently dismissed from the police force, losing all benefits and pension. He was charged by the District Attorney's Office with a series of serious offenses: abuse of power while on duty, threatening to kill, by pulling out a gun and pointing it at General Thorne with threatening words, intentionally causing injury or threatening to cause injury with a dangerous weapon, and conspiracy to commit extortion. Investigators also found evidence that Baxter had engaged in similar law-breaking behavior against several small business owners and people who had recently moved to the area over the past few years, though not to the extent of this gun-wielding threat. At the trial held a few months later, faced with overwhelming evidence and no reasonable defense, Kevin Baxter had to bow his head and admit all the charges. He hoped that his late confession would help him get a lighter sentence. However, the presiding judge, after reviewing the entire case file, the seriousness and blatant nature of the crime, especially the fact that a police officer dared to commit hooliganism, racial discrimination and extortion against a citizen, and a high-ranking military officer at that, imposed a severe sentence. Kevin Baxter was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The sentence was widely accepted by the public as a strong message from the justice system that corruption, abuse of power, and racism in law enforcement will never be tolerated, regardless of who the perpetrator is. Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne did not attend the sentencing hearing. He had left the case to law enforcement. What he wanted most was for justice to be done, and for people like Baxter to be removed from the ranks of the law. After the case was resolved, he went about his daily life, resumed his work at the Pentagon, and began to enjoy the peace of his new home in McLean. The horror of that morning was certainly a memory that would never be forgotten, but it did not diminish his faith in good things, in people like his cousin Frank Miller who carried out justice. The case of Officer Kevin Baxter became a valuable lesson, a typical example that was included in the training sessions on professional ethics, anti-corruption, and anti-discrimination in the entire Fairfax County Police Department and many other police departments in the area. Police Chief Frank Miller, true to his promise, carried out a strong internal reform, tightened discipline, and increased supervision, determined to build a truly clean, strong police force, serving and protecting all citizens fairly and without discrimination. The lesson of this story is clear and undeniable. No one, no matter what uniform they wear, no matter what power they hold, is above the law. Racism, greed, and abuse of power are poisonous sores that must be detected early and ruthlessly eliminated from society, especially from those entrusted with the responsibility of protecting justice and public safety. Sometimes, a person's very status and position, even if they do not want it, can inadvertently become a harsh test of the integrity and fairness of an entire system. And fortunately, in this case, the system worked, albeit a little too late. What do you think of Officer Baxter's 7-year sentence? Is it really proportionate to the actions he committed? Would the case have been dealt with so quickly and harshly if Governor Marcus Thorne had not had such a close relationship with Police Chief Frank Miller? What does this say about our system? What feelings or thoughts does this story bring up about the abuse of power by some individuals in law enforcement and our hope for a truly fair justice for all?